mail for us. What you do is you email confessions@scalaradio.co.uk. We can change the names. We can make it decent, we can make it broadcastable, all that kind of stuff. Send us your tale, and if you could send it in, that'd be great. Confessions@scalaradio.co.uk. Into the collective booth, we welcome Jodie back, who's been gallivanting already.
Hello.
Where have you been?
I've been skiing.
How'd it go?
It was good, thank you. How was your week without me?
Well, obviously, it wasn't the same.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
You can take that either way. We'd only been on a week and you were on holiday.
I know. Well, I booked it before I got the job, and I told Rick, and I felt really bad.
Because Rick's in charge. Rick is head cheese here.
Well, yes, and you've got to look at the leave allocation properly.
Yeah, and I really didn't want to disappoint him in my first week, but he said it was fine, so I'm back.
Oh, this is like a live staff meeting.
He didn't disappoint at all, actually. It was a great first week.
All right, Mr. Pepper.
Hello.
Yes. Have you asked for leave yet?
No, I haven't. Although it's on my to-do list.
Stop stirring inside, please.
I was going to say we could talk about it now, couldn't we?
No, we couldn't. Absolutely not.
Today's confession comes from Steve. Well, we're calling him Stephen. Stephen, thank you very much indeed. Father Simon, I beg forgiveness for something that happened during the summer of 1975, when, aged 14, I joined my cousin Scott, aged 15, and my aunt and uncle on their annual 2-week caravan holiday. Hello to everyone listening in caravans at the moment. There are plenty of caravan confessions, and you know what you can do with them. Scott and I agree. That sounded very unwelcoming, didn't it?
Very unwelcoming, yes.
Yeah, well, that was. You can send them to us, obviously. Scott and I agreed that we had matured since the previous year and that we needed something adventurous to keep us entertained. As we walked around looking for inspiration, we spotted a notice pinned to the caravan site office. 150cc Lambretta scooter for sale. Despite an asking price of £30, which was all our holiday spending money put together, and the fact that neither of us is old enough to ride a scooter, Scott was resolute. "Hey, mister, how much do you want for your scooter, then?" He shouted to the site manager. £30, the manager replied. "Will £23 do?" Scott asked, without even seeing the scooter. "It's a deal," the site manager replied, quickly pocketing the money. So that was it. We were the proud owners of a scooter we haven't even seen, and we spent most of our 2-week holiday money on by 2 p.m. on the first day. We also hadn't considered factors such as who would ride it and where we were going to ride it. Anyway, no riding in the caravan park, the site manager told us, but there's some wasteland behind the caravan park. That's okay. Fortunately, the scooter seemed in decent condition, so we wasted no time pushing it to the wasteland, where we rode it to our heart's content. Much to everyone's dismay on the caravan park, we spent every day of our holiday tearing around the wasteland, oblivious to spoiling the peace and quiet. As parts of the scooter began to fall off, holidaymakers had to endure even more noise when the exhaust pipe went. Our last day arrived, and Scott and I decided on one final run. As time came for us to leave for home, we realised we should get rid of the scooter. "Let's take it back to the site manager," Scott said. "See if we can get some money back." "Can I ride it back?" I asked. "Sure," he said, and jumped on the back. Brimming with confidence after my 2-week crash course, if you see what I mean, we took off towards the caravan park. As we entered the park, it soon became apparent that my scooter training hadn't included having a passenger. When I tried to brake, the scooter picked up speed. The morning moisture on the grass clearly nullifying the brakes altogether. As I tried to steer in the direction of the site office, without warning, the front end shot out from underneath us, sending us both crashing to the floor. Our scooter careered across the grass towards a large static caravan. On its side, the scooter slid right underneath the caravan with a crash so hard it lifted the caravan a foot in the air at one end. As the scooter spluttered and died, there was a frenzy of activity at the opposite end of the caravan. Someone shouted, "What the hell was that then?" Our trusted steed, the full range of voices.
It's properly on display today.
Vivid.
Our trusted steed was well and truly jammed under the caravan. We both sat frozen to the spot, one behind the other, just as we'd been on the scooter. It took at least 5 attempts before the now twisted door of the caravan opened, and a giant of a man emerged. He looked straight at Scott at me, sitting there as if nothing had happened. "Morning," Scott shouted as we both smiled and waved at the man nervously. The scary man scanned the length of his caravan and then back at us before replying, "Morning, boys," with more of a trace of suspicion in his voice. Oh, right, okay. "Morning, boys." Clearly, he knew something was wrong. but he couldn't see our scooter or anything else that could have caused such a racket. Just two innocent-looking lads having a sit-down on the wet grass in the middle of a caravan park like you do. "Are you having a nice holiday?" I shouted, trying to distract him from further analysis of his caravan. "Yes," he replied hesitantly, still eyeing up and down the caravan. Eventually he lowered his head and retreated back inside. It took him just as many attempts to close the door as it had to open it. As soon as the door closed, we ran as fast as we could go and jumped straight into my uncle's car, protesting to him that we should go straight away if we wanted to avoid the traffic. And that is my story. And I ask for forgiveness, Father Simon and your team, not only for bending the scary man's caravan, but also for spoiling the peace and quiet for so many people on their well-earned vacation, and for wrecking a classic scooter that deserved a far more dignified end. Yours, regrettably and regretfully, Stephen, not my real name. Well, now, I wonder quite how long it took Scary Man to realise that the reason that his caravan was now tilted in one end was because there was a scooter up at the other side. But obviously he didn't investigate further, and so therefore Stephen and his mate got away with it. Let's see what Jodie make.
Oh gosh!
Bashed my microphone in excitement. Jodie, what do you make of that?
Is it Steve or Stephen?
It was Stephen.
Oh, it's a fake name anyway.
Yes,
isn't it?
that's right. So you call him what you
Maybe
want.
that was the
really.
disguise. You just dropped the end.
Oh yeah. I think what you did was, well, you ruined a lot of people's holidays, and I think for the peace and quiet, that is kind of unforgivable. But you tried to clear up your mistake with niceness to the man. You were very polite, and I think I would have done the exact same as you and just got on with it and kind of asked him how his holiday was. So I'm going to forgive you, Stephen. Yeah.
You're a pushover. Definitely a pushover, Mr. Pepper.
You accused me of that last week.
You're a pushover too.
There's only one choice then. No, I think peace and quiet are very hard to find on a holiday anyway. I can think of many like whining scooters in the background. If you're in France, you hear that sort of whining in the background. You can never escape the noise, but that's part of the quirkiness, the character. So I think I can forgive him for that.
Okay, it's looking quite good in the studio, but let's see how grumpy old Rick deals with it.
What a great holiday for a start. You know, they've gone out there, they've had an adventure. That sheer exhilaration of that moment when they were skidding under. I mean, what the buzz they must have got from that. And let's face it, they woke this guy up. He's probably asleep, so he's got the chance to enjoy his holiday more. He's got a slightly reconfigured caravan, so it's completely forgiven from me.
All right, forgiven here. Is it forgiven as far as you're concerned? People's verdict, please, on the text, 64100. The first word is Scala. Into the collective, by the way, Jodie and Mark and Jack are here. You're very welcome. I'll just turn you on. There you go.
Hello.
But first of all, a word with Jack. This is Jack Pepper, Scala's own Jack Pepper, because we were talking about ugly animals, and without doubt, the blowfish. And we've just tweeted it. If you follow us at Scala Radio, we've just tweeted a picture of the blowfish. Is that what it's called?
Well,
blobfish,
I call it the blobfish.
That's right, the
Yeah.
blobfish.
Yeah.
Is just pretty hideous. I just showed Mark hadn't seen one.
This is a new thing for me. Yes, it's quite unpleasant.
It's very descriptive. It is literally a blobfish.
But
Yeah.
it
It's a white
turns out
blob.
that Jack has written a song about the blobfish. How come you wrote a song about the blobfish?
Well, we're going back to my school days now, and it was a biology teacher. I was in year 10 doing my GCSEs, and midway through the course, she got another job and left us. And she was one of our favourite teachers. The class loved her, and in the classroom, she always had pictures of weird creatures. And the biggest picture of all, right above the whiteboard, was the blobfish.
Yes.
So we decided, as a farewell treat, I don't know if that's the right word, we would collaborate on a piece of music for her. So I wrote the music, and then we collaborated as a class on the lyrics, and then played it to a very bemused teacher.
Do you remember how the lyrics went?
Well, the chorus, it's I'm a blobfish and I'm proud of it. I don't care what people say. I might have, and then the end of the chorus is sort of statistics and facts about the blobfish. So it's a sort of documentary crossed with an anthem of our time, you know.
Basically
a proud
saying,
I love
it
that.
doesn't matter how you look, you're all valued.
Yes,
It's one of those kind of
absolutely.
things.
This
Such
is
a
me,
message.
basically, but with blobfish.
Anyway, it was just very interesting because it's probably the only song ever. You should tweet about that.
We should hear this. At
I
some point.
don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know whether it's worth tweeting about. It's one of those things that's locked away in the drawer.
You've got
you
my
know.
attention.
Yeah.
Anyway, here comes today's story. It comes from John in Sheffield. Thank you, John. Father Simon and the Saintly Collective. Sorry tale I'm about to tell you took place a quarter of a century ago, and although I've lived with this misdemeanour since then, I've resisted the temptation to confess until now. We're in the early 90s. It's my sixth form college in the West Midlands. Back then I was a young, fresh-faced student taking my A-levels, one of which was theatre studies. A whole bunch of people going, that's not a proper subject. Well, it actually is.
Disagree with
Yeah, I
that.
was going to say.
I did
stand up
theatre
for this.
studies.
Our theatre studies tutor, Dave, was the head of the department. He was a jovial fellow in his mid to late 40s. He's fairly strict, but he knew his job inside out. He had several rules for theatre studies. 1, no chewing gum. 2, no feet on chairs. 3, no mocking of a performance. As youngsters, I admit these rules seemed a little old-fashioned, but looking back, the third one now makes complete sense, as it meant that we were able to explore and develop our acting techniques in complete freedom. If only Dave could have known how successful his teaching methods would be. These trips that we had, which allowed us to make them, were always great, because we always used to take trips in the evenings. It meant that we could go to the pub beforehand for a lemonade or two. As I'm sure you'll appreciate, this soon helped the two theatre study groups that we were to bond enormously, as trips to the pub do. One of the things Dave was most proud of was the way that the theatre studies department would stage half-yearly productions. These were extremely lavish affairs with professional makeup, lighting, costumes, staging, direction, courtesy of Dave and his fellow theatre studies tutor. This particular year, we were working on something highbrow by Chekhov. It involved a cast of over 20, with the rest of the course members working backstage. Father Simon, I have to tell you that we worked really hard on that production. Even though we were mere youngsters, we tried desperately hard to become mid-19th century aging Russian aristocrats. And looking back, I feel confident that we gave it a really great shot. We learned our lines, we attended every single rehearsal without fail. Apart from this one time. You see, Dave had arranged a dress rehearsal for after college. It just happened to be after we'd been on an activities afternoon, you know, the type where you go off-site and try something different, photography, art, that kind of thing. Not really free time, but not structured time either. And it just so happened that everyone in the cast and crew had somehow ended up in the usual pub. Not the poshest of establishments, it has to be said, but you know how it is. The lemonade flew. The laughs grew, and we spent far too much time watching music videos on the video jukebox. And so a plan was formulated. Even to this day, I am not sure by whom, but the basic details of it were this. We were all going to skip the dress rehearsal.
No.
And
No.
every one of us. A scheme was devised whereby an official-looking sign would appear on the college notice board cancelling the rehearsal. One that each of us would claim to have seen. The next day, as you'd imagine, things were quite tense in theatre studies. Dave was understandably upset that his cast and crew had deserted him, so much so that we were all asked to go into his room one by one and repeat the following phrase. I did not write the sign. I don't know who did write the sign. We all dutifully did as we were asked, all of us, members of both classes, trying our best to look earnest and sorrowful and innocent. I still remember to this day when it came to my turn, looking Dave in the eye, looking earnest, sorrowful and innocent, saying, I did not write the sign, and I don't know who did write the sign, even if I did. I would like to point out, 25 years on from the events of that day, I am now a teacher in a primary school, and I really do appreciate Dave's 3 rules: no chewing, no feet on chairs, and no mocking. Ironically, I now have the difficult task of directing the end of year school play, and I truly do appreciate just how difficult it is to organise such an event. Now, I'm not seeking forgiveness for missing the dress rehearsal. It was, after all, much needed break from the long and tiring term of work. Neither do I seek forgiveness for staying in the pub. For one thing, it gave us a chance to bond. Now, I seek forgiveness for the fact that we so casually turned the acting skills that Dave had lovingly taught us against him. You see, it seems that we were so earnest and truthful in our denials and lack of confession back then that the truth never did come out. It was never mentioned again until now. I hope that you can see it in your hearts to forgive not just me, but my fellow theatre studies students, and therefore I take it upon myself to throw everyone on your mercy. And the less said about the many empty bottles of Strongbow cider stashed in the suspended ceiling of the aforementioned art centre dressing rooms during the week of performances, the better. Yours, a repentant would-be actor, John from Sheffield. Now, the one bit of information that we don't get from that is how did the actual performance go? Because it seems to me if you miss the dress, then you're in big trouble.
Yep.
But if everybody misses the dress, then what can he do? He can't fire you. Anyway, Jodie's going first.
John, I think that's terrible. I've done dancing and drama my whole life, well, as a child in school and stuff, and I know how important rehearsals are and how seriously teachers take it. I'm very disappointed in you. I don't forgive you.
It's a hard line, Mark.
Yeah, similar, I'm afraid. Dave obviously put his heart and soul into this, and you can just imagine Dave's face when no one turned up. That would have been awful. Unforgiven, I'm sorry.
Okay, this sounds like it's going to be pretty harsh, but let's turn to Jack, maybe, for some consoling words. No? I don't know.
We can hope, can't we? It was lemonade originally, and then it became Strongbow. It's escalating, isn't it? And see,
That's the way it goes.
Really? See, I
never
don't
lemonade.
drink. I don't drink, so I can sort of
Lemonade's a
vaguely,
gateway.
I can sympathise though with the idea that it can loosen you up and relax you if you're in the pub with friends.
What, lemonade?
Lemonade, in my instance, lemonade, but for others maybe something else. But no, I can forgive that because I think that it's creative, it's relaxing. You're with friends. That's what it's all about.
Even though they missed the dress rehearsal.
Well, they were
Dress
technically,
rehearsal.
they were sort of rehearsing just in another setting, weren't they? You know, if they had to suddenly move venue, they were covered. They had done it in the pub.
The dress rehearsal is where you get it all wrong.
Yeah.
So that the performance
Well,
is
they
right.
technically did that, didn't they?
But
People's verdict, please do you forgive Jack, yes or no? On the text, it's 64100. The first word has to be Scala. 64100. Do you forgive Jack, yes or no? Thank you. Yes, so it's confession time, and it's 11:13. Today's tale. Oh, and Jodie is here, and Mark is here, and Jack's here, by the way.
Hello, hello.
Thank
Hello.
you.
good morning.
Today's tale comes from Jeremiah Thriptwhistle, which one imagines is not a real name, but it may well be. Hello, Jeremiah. Father Simon of the Assembled Collective, I seek to unburden myself from the torment and guilt of an incident which took place 25 years ago. At that time, I was attending a city centre secondary school, opposite which was a small branch of an electrical retailer. And as was typical at the time, the window display was a wall of television screens of differing sizes. Every day I'd wait for a lift home from school outside said retailer and would marvel at the array of TV sets, hoping that perhaps one day I might own one for my bedroom. I'd set my eye upon a lovely set with a remote control. Father Simon, at that time, remote controls weren't commonplace, and the notion of a teenager not owning a television, but a TV with a remote control was an optimistic one. I penned a note to Santa that year asking for that TV set. Clearly I'd been a good boy, and the bearded fella kindly obliged when Christmas arrived. And after a couple of months of happy bedroom viewing and a couple more months waiting for lifts outside the electrical retailer, I hatched a plan. One day, I slipped the remote control into my bag before I headed off to school. As usual, at the end of the day, I trudged over the road to the electrical retailer and waited for my lift. It was at this point that I laid down my bag and pulled out the remote control. Taking care to conceal the remote, I pointed it towards the display of television sets and held the volume up button. And oh, how I giggled to myself when a startled shop assistant came rushing to the window to figure out why so many televisions in the display had gone rogue. I'm ashamed to say that this wasn't enough. In the following days, I performed the same trick numerous times, morning and afternoon, even going so far as to change the volume several times in a single day. GMTV was fine and everything, but not when it was turned up to 11. The Demon Headmaster, The Simpsons, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, all good TV shows, but all, you'd have to say, unbearable at full volume when being played by, I would have guessed, 15 televisions. The shop assistants would turn them down. I would wait 2 minutes. I'd dial them back up again. My schoolboy japes came to an abrupt end, though, when one day I reached the store only to find that all the TV sets had disappeared. At the time this indiscretion took place, electricals were far less throwaway, and the electrical retailer concerned had an in-store repair desk. Glancing over at said desk, I saw all the televisions in pieces, with a frustrated-looking repairman seemingly trying to figure out what had happened to their beautiful display televisions. I seek forgiveness not just from your collective there, but also from the employers of said electrical retailer, and can only hope that my hijinks didn't make some small contribution to the eventual collapse of the business.
Oh,
20
gosh.
Oh, that's a game changer.
20 years later. But most importantly, I seek forgiveness from Santa, who, having rewarded my good behaviour so generously, must have been incredulous at my appalling behaviour. Today's tale from Jeremiah Thriptwhistle, fun to be had with a remote control, up and down, all obviously the sets of the same make. Maybe they all worked off the same kind of frequency. I don't know. Jodie, what do you say?
Well, you're obviously very creative, Jeremiah Thriptwhistle, with your name and your creative mischief. But I think for what you did, you got that present from Santa, you were really excited, and you just kind of abused the power of the remote, and turned out to be quite a costly mistake for the TV shop. Poor them, taking all these TVs apart. So I'm sorry, I don't forgive you.
Forgive it, Mark. What are you saying?
My very first job was in an electrical retailer in Luton, and it's a very dull job. And so he gave them something to do. I think this is a fine thing. I forgive completely. Brilliant ingenuity. Well done.
Well, you made their life more entertaining.
Much more entertaining, yes.
All right, Mr. Pepper.
I've got to say, I'm relieved that at least the remote works. At home, you just sort of stand in front of the TV and the button doesn't work. It could be the batteries, but who knows? It's temperamental. So I'm just pleased that he proved that the thing works. And as I say, he's creative. I think it was quite musical. 15 TVs going off. It's like an orchestra.
So full volume?
The full volume, yeah. I mean, there have to be subtleties every now and then, but I can forgive that. I think it's creative.
Okay, on balance, it's forgiven here. So if you'd like to express your verdict, what you do is you do it on the text 64100. The first word has to be Scala, then tell us who you are and what you think of all that. 64100, the first word has to be Scala. He changed his name.
Did I?
He was miming the piano part. A real skilled musician, actually.
Twix-like fingers.
Is that right? I could do with one of those.
Shall I go and get one?
No, because you've got some confessions duties.
Okay, fair
first of all. So Rick Radio is here, and also we have Jack and Jody. They're not. When I say Jack and Jody, it's not like they're together. What, you know what I mean? It's like
Well, I don't know.
You're getting yourself into a
This is a
situation
revelation.
there's Jody, comma, and then there's Jack, and then there's Rick Radio.
Morning.
We need nicknames, don't we, Jack?
Yeah, we do.
Today's
Twix.
today's.
Kit Kat.
That was my cat's name.
You've got a cat called Kit Kat and a dog called Twix.
Hang on. You've got a family of chocolate.
Yeah, all my pets have been named after chocolate bars, and that was so weird that you just said that, because we were just talking about how my dog was called Twix and my cat was called Kit Kat. Sorry.
And do you have a Curly Whirly in there somewhere?
No, that's next.
A kitten called Curly Whirly. Here's today's tale. It comes from Louis. Thank you very much indeed, Louis. First of all, some context. I've always been a dedicated and devout fan of chutney. It's been such a constant part of my life that people who know me consider it as much part of my defining characteristics as my height or the colour of my eyes. I eat chutney every day, on toast, on its own, and of course as nature intended, with cheese. Well, at least I did. Last year, two sad things happened. First of all, my wife's dear father passed away. He was old, but the end was unexpected. Then, in a coincidence, his favourite tree fell down in a storm, and it was a pear tree, and it was a pear tree that he planted as a boy. Now, it was also the tree that produced a bountiful harvest of pears each season, which he systematically turned into multiple jars of chutney year on year. This was a skill he honed over several decades, and one he passed on to his dutiful daughter, my wife. Yes, master chutney maker marries must-eat chutney lover. You can only imagine the level of mirth and mockery that this caused. The wedding speeches spoke of little else. So my wife thought it would be entirely fitting to produce one final special batch of pear chutney. The day arrived and her parents' house was abuzz with relatives and friends, including her sweet old mum, who's also an avid chutney eater, although possibly not in my league. With no little ceremony, the pears were collected, peeled and chopped, with relatives close and distant all adding to the effort and love that was going into this final special batch. Imagine the barn building scene in Witness, but with pears. Okay. I'm not sure how much you know about chutney production, but after the assorted ingredients are amassed and added into a huge pot, they need to boil and then simmer for a good few hours. Most of my wife's family decided to go for a walk at this point. The others retired to the living room to look at old photo albums. It was left to me to remain in the kitchen and occasionally stir the chutney. An important job. It was around this time that I grew hungry. Such was the size of the chutney pan that it selfishly obscured all the other hobs on the cooker, making it impossible to fry an egg, which is what I had decided to do. Calculating that it doesn't take long to fry an egg, I thought the gap in proceedings would be unnoticeable. I just needed to remove the pan long enough to make my well-deserved snack and then replace it. The problem was the kitchen is not huge. There were no worktop spaces big enough to put a giant pan, and the floor was covered in lino, which I imagine would melt if I put the pan on it. At the time, I heralded my next thought as a brainwave of rare genius. In hindsight, it was the start of my demise. I decided to put the bubbling chutney pan outside the back door, which opened from the kitchen onto a small patio. I couldn't find a lid big enough, so I draped 2 tea towels over the top and placed it carefully on the ground, which was wet after a recent shower. I shut the door and made my egg, which was delicious, especially as I added a generous smear of last year's grape and fig chutney. But my enjoyment was cut short by the sound of the family returning from their walk, including my wife, who I knew would want to check on the progress of the chutney. I lurched for the back door, grabbed the chutney pan and placed it back on the hob. I could hear her footsteps getting closer as I whipped off the tea towels. I always thought eyes widening with horror was an expression, but what I saw nearly made my eyelids split in half. There, in the pan, slip-sliding and groping the chutney on a silvery trail of gloopy slime, were two of the most monstrous, enormous slugs that I have ever seen. Their bulbous bodies pulsated with gluttonous delight as they slowly swayed with greedy intent, leaving enough sickly residue to form a near total film of sinewy slug saliva on top of this most precious of chutneys. I swear they froze like they'd been caught in a lewd act. I had seconds. My wife was about to enter. I had to act. Without thinking, I grabbed both slugs with a rapid, one-handed double dip and put them in the only place I could hide them effectively, my pocket. With my other hand, I stirred the chutney. With my hand, I stirred the chutney, quickly folding in the viscous slug juice in the process. My wife was thrilled to see me so attentive. She praised my technique, but wanted to take over, lovingly stirring the pot in the way her father had taught her. I slowly backed away. My pocketed hand was having an unexpected wrestle with the surprisingly active, syrupy prisoners. It felt like two detached thumbs having a really slimy thumb war. I suppose they can't have been happy having their chutney disco interrupted. I escaped to the garden and fought the need to retch while I gently scraped the vile, gloopy stumps onto the lawn. My hand was sticky and smelt rancid. My favourite trousers were ruined, but through the window I saw the worst consequence of my stupidity unfold in slow motion, a vision which still haunts me to this day. My beautiful wife, daintily blowing a spoon laden with her treasured chutney, then puckering her lips and tasting the goods with closed-eyed delight. How did the slugs get in there? Surely the pan was too hot. How on earth did they get so big? My knowledge of convection and slug biology led to no satisfactory answers. Either way, it had happened, and it was too late to halt the chutney's awful destiny. I'm ashamed to say I didn't tell my wife then, and nor have I told her since. Nor have I told any of the proud recipients of their most special gift. It was a bumper batch. 24 large jars of my wife's In Memory of Dad pear chutney were made that day. We kept 4. The others were sent back to their homes to be enjoyed and savoured with the added knowledge that this would be the last chutney of its kind. Of course, everyone imagined I'd be the first in line to gorge myself for this most refined and important batch, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. And because I couldn't realistically single out this one chutney as being out of bounds, I had to create a bumbled lie that effectively said, I'm done with chutney. I tried to explain that after so many years of eating this stuff, I'd finally reached maximum enjoyment capacity and I'd gone off it forever. The sad truth is, I love it and yearn for it daily. But I have never tried the offending slug-tainted brew. Not once. So I beg forgiveness for my cowardly behaviour. The knowledge that these innocent people are digesting such indignities with each mouthful is a terrible burden. I've changed my name for the purpose of this confession, as the events described are dangerously recent and the potential for familial ramifications all too real. Even if the story is very specific, I can divert any scent of suspicion by using the different name as reason enough for it basically not being me. It's important, this chutney, and it's got slug slime. Jodie.
I think, Louis, you really should be asking forgiveness from the slugs. Poor slugs.
Who cares about the slugs? What about all the recipients of the chutney?
I don't know. I think he's really desperate for this chutney. He's obviously missing it lots because it hasn't been a long time and he wants it really bad. I'm going to forgive you, Louis, because how did they get in there? And, you know, with the big batch, you probably couldn't taste the slug juice. It's a bit like, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here.
An endurance test.
Jack, what did you say?
Oh, you lost me on the chutney, to be honest with you. I'm not a fan. Well, no, it causes a bit of mirth. I try and hide it from Rick and Jenny, but I think Jodie's aware of it, that I sometimes have pitta on its own. I don't have anything with it. I don't, you know,
Weirdo.
and toast, I can have
weird.
that, just, you know, butter, nothing on it, that's fine. So, to be honest with you, as soon as you said chutney, I was feeling particularly harsh today. So
My fridge is only full of, it's only got chutney in it.
just chutney.
Chutneys and pickles.
Essential nutrients. I'm afraid I can't forgive that.
Rick Radio.
Well, this is a tough one because I was going to forgive for the effective use of alliteration around sinuous slug saliva, which is absolutely amazing.
Good.
But then I really can't forgive because the guy's just basically waved goodbye to everybody else while he's keeping himself safe and sound. So all these other people are consuming this slug-infested chutney. Mind you, you can have a slug of beer, so maybe now a slug of chutney isn't. Not forgiven.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve, for that. Louis, thanks for the confession. And if you want to have your say on the text 64100, the first word has to be Scala. Tell us who you are, please. 64100, first word is Scala. A collective led by young Jack. So got Jody, Jack and Rick Radio here. This is the same Jack who, about an hour ago, we had an email from a listener saying, I'm nearly 70, and I don't normally go for 19-year-olds, but that Jack Pepper, he's very...
The first person to say that.
boisterous, very puppy-like.
I'm very flattered. I don't even know. Well, I mean, what if you're a puppy? What does that... what type of puppy?
It means
What
you're
breed?
enthusiastic and lovable and cuddly.
She's seen your ears as well, Jack.
I was going to say, what are you saying, Rick?
Okay, Jody, Jack and Rick here to sit in judgment on today's tale, which comes from Bruce, which is an alias, I think. Father Simon and the Pragmatic Collective. First of all, I'm loving Scala. Okay, forgiven. Secondly, before I can listen to you with a clear conscience, I must ask for your forgiveness for something that occurred in 1977 during my final year at school, which I've never quite forgiven myself for. All the names have been changed in order to protect me. During our 5 years at grammar school, my friend Tom and I had studied woodwork, and for all those years we'd been forced to endure the relentless praise bestowed upon our classmate Edgar for his outstanding carpentry skills. Despite mine and Tom's best efforts, at the end of every assignment, Edgar's work would be recognised by all the teachers and used as a benchmark for the rest of the class's pathetic attempts to perfect dovetail joints and the like. Look at Edgar's lapwood joints and his mortise and tenon joints. Why can't you boys all be like that? The teachers would ask, which only served to worsen our resentment for Edgar and his carpentry prowess. Both Tom and I knew that Edgar's father used to be a master toy maker who had emigrated from Latvia after the war and was now the school caretaker. Once, Edgar had told both Tom and me that he and his father used to sneak into the woodworking room at the weekends so his father could help him with his joints. But because he told us that in confidence, our schoolboy code of practice meant that we could never share this information with the teachers. Instead, with Edgar smiling smugly, we would just accept that our work was indeed rubbish compared to his, but consoled ourselves that woodwork was at least better than studying geography, for example. Our resentment, no disrespect to geography teachers anywhere, our resentment of Edgar had grown over the years and reached new heights at the end of our first year when Edgar produced his best work ever. It was an impressive and intricately made train, complete with its own tender. It really was amazing. However, it was the last straw for Tom and me when his work was then selected as the centrepiece for a display of student achievements in the main entrance hall on Parents' Evening. And that is when my dastardly deed occurred. Being fifth formers, Tom and I decided to volunteer to help out at Parents' Evening. Our job was to welcome parents in the main entrance and offer them cups of tea and coffee. As we waited for the parents to arrive, we took one last look at Edgar's masterpiece, proudly positioned centre stage, and, when the coast was clear, we swapped the elegant train for a masterpiece of our own. It was a single piece which we'd spent the afternoon working on, basically comprising of a block of badly sawn wood into which we'd randomly hammered nails and screws, making sure they were as twisted and as bent as we could. Mission accomplished, well, almost. We placed a card against the work, simply saying, "My Life," in inverted commas, that's what it was called, by Edgar O's, age 15 and a half. It was hilarious watching the parents mingling around the display, quizzically looking at one another as they admired Edgar's centrepiece, until, that is, Edgar's mother arrived. The look on her face was a mix of bewilderment and disappointment as she smiled at the other parents who were feigning admiration for her son's work. It was modern art, basically. So, Father Simon, I need your forgiveness for what we did to Edgar's reputation and his carpentry job prospects that evening, but for all the sympathetic looks his mother had to endure also, I asked for forgiveness from the deputy headmaster, who, during his assembly hall address to all the parents, singled out Edgar's outstanding carpentry skills as an example of what the school was capable of achieving, blissfully unaware of the chaos that the parents had actually seen. Begging your forgiveness, shamefully yours. And that's Bruce, who... Well, there's envy writ large all the way through this tale. There's the final train set, the final nail in the coffin, if you like, and so they swapped it with just a lump of wood with nails stuffed into it because they were jealous of his prowess. Jodie goes first.
Well, Bruce, I'm going to forgive you, first of all, because Edgar was a fraud all along. And really, like, the school's showcasing artwork that wasn't really the artwork they produced. It's all a fraud, and I think your jealousy maybe got a bit much, but I'm going to forgive you because he didn't make it.
Okay, well, you are essentially right. Edgar's work wasn't his own, it was his dad's. Young Jack.
Yeah, the quality control at this school is patchy, isn't it? That they didn't know. I suppose it's kind of common practice, though, isn't it, that your parents help you with things. We had to build a castle in Year 7. Not like a full-size one, but, you know, a little model castle. And I remember doing the odd bit of painting, but my parents... helped with a lot of the
let
rest.
him into the school on the weekends and built a train with him.
Yeah.
But I think reputationally there is something there that is very damaging to poor young Edgar. So I can't forgive that.
There isn't a school project anywhere that a parent hasn't, I'll just add a little bit there. Just, I think I can just change your grammar on that. Quick radio.
Well, when I was at school, we did woodwork. We just made cheese boards. That was it. But I think forgive them, because what they've done, they've created a bit of sort of surrealist woodwork. My life, all these nails and bits of wood chunked out. So the parents coming up saw something far more stimulating and creative than a train. So absolutely forgiven. And Edgar, you naughty boy.
Was that a David Stowe cheese board that you made?
It is a lovely David Stowe cheese board.
Okay, if you wish to pronounce on Bruce's confession for the People's Verdict, you text 64100 and the first word is Scala. Thank you very much.